Hello, everyone.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome back. This is episode 3 of XIV Light Party, and Tylp has the plague, but has the little plague, not the big plague. So he's going to sound a little bit funny. But we have with us Tylp and Croa. Enky is off tonight. So go ahead and say hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Hello,
everyone.
And in addition, we have with us special guest. Go ahead and talk.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hello. So, how's
What are we
everybody been doing?
Busy. I didn't even realize Halloween should have been passed, so it's been fast.
Yeah, it was yesterday. Did anybody give out candy or anything like that?
Nope.
I didn't have any knocks on my door, so I assume no one went up to where I was, but I'm also on the second story, so I don't... I'm probably out of reach anyway.
I attempted, but no one rang the bell, so I just ate the candy.
All right. Now, I do have an issue. I went to go buy some of the discounted candy, and there wasn't any. I don't know if stores are starting to get rid of them earlier or something, but I showed up midday today and there was no candy. So I'm gonna need that to be figured out at some point. I don't
That's
know
part
why
of the
candy
tradition.
Yeah, right. You go buy candy the day after Halloween, but for some reason they're getting rid of it the day after Halloween. There is no candy, and I'm like, hello.
This is anti-consumerism filing.
It's so bad. News and updates. We're just gonna go over some small stuff before we get started. Just wanted to do a quick review with everyone about the TOS updates. If you haven't read those yet, please check those out. As far as the conversation has been going in the community, there seems to be a lot of debate about what those entail. But as far as I know, at least from what I've read, the TOS changes aren't that bad. They are just basically defining in better detail some of the reasons that can get you penalized and your account penalized. So yeah, do read over those and make sure you understand those. They're not too rough, I promise. But it's just better details, I think. And then they even gave a review afterwards, like a couple days ago. They were like, hey, we wanted to clarify this. So I think it's not too bad. So make sure to check those out and protect your account. Don't do something and then get in trouble. Especially with a expansion around the corner.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as a role player, I was actually quite pleased with some of the changes.
Yeah, they did have some really good ones. Especially with a expansion around the corner.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as a role player, I was actually quite pleased with some of the changes.
Yeah, they did have some really good ones. I will say, from the wording of a lot of them, they're starting to become a lot more aware of the various communities that are available in Final Fantasy XIV. And I think that was really good that they mentioned specific certain concepts that are usually ignored, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I'm happy. I like the changes.
The clarification of how to use the party finder and the other category I thought was really good, because I do know that there's a lot of social events that are advertised through the party finder. It's just extremely handy. Right, I know we have
exactly.
what is it, communities or that other function? Sorry, I feel really bad. The one that was it was supposed to be for all of that, but never quite worked out well.
Use it. I genuinely I have a community up, but I barely post in it and I forget. So it's hard to be notification heavy, I suppose. So that just doesn't work with I get those pings and I activate on the pings, I get no pings, so I don't know what's there.
I think what would be really useful is definitely an in-game calendar system.
Oh yes.
Really, really nice. It would make those communities really handy, is if you could subscribe to a community and then you see the calendar. Yeah, that would be fantastic. But as it is right now, it could use some improvement. I'll just put it that way.
Right. And then I believe the next order of business this week specifically, we have November 5th as the announced time for the next live letter. This is probably going to be the last live letter we get until Endwalker's release. And as far as I know, this one is planned to discuss changes to crafters and gatherers. And correct me if I'm wrong, it might mention a new PvP mode. I'm not entirely sure about that yet.
I believe that is supposed to be the big star of that live letter. From what I
the big star, the new small scale PvP mode, which I'm interested in because I've definitely been getting more involved with the PvP community as of late, thanks to a lot of the shout outs on Twitter, and it's actually been really cool. So I think this is going to be a really big time to kind of tune in and see what they're planning to do to get more of the general community involved to the PvP sector. I guess, is that the right word? The PvP sector of Final Fantasy XIV. And kind of get that more involved. But I'm super excited. to see. And then, of course, I mean, it's just general updates and news that are always exciting to hear from the dev team and get to see Yoshi on screen because he's cool. So definitely tune in when you get a chance. And if you don't get a chance to tune in, we'll definitely be trying to cover it in some way, at least a brief overview or something like that with everyone. So it's going to be pretty cool.
I'll be excited about the new PvP mode as long as it allows me to do what I like to do most in PvP. That is run around as a bard and find people and silence them and generally be just annoying as hell.
Nice. Hey, that's a tactic. You trust me. Like as a tank, like me tanking in PvP when a healer's silenced, that's when I go for the kill. So it's perfect. It's perfect. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of
But
fun.
the biggest part of this week, especially for us on this channel, is the Duty Roulette Rally, which will be taking place November 6th on the Extra Life Day. If you haven't heard about that, we've already posted it on the Twitter. You can check that out real quick. And of course, check on the Discord as well, where we're talking about it. And if you weren't here for our last Duty Roulette, in a nutshell, this is the quick summary. We have a bunch of groups of people who form parties, and we race each other to complete actions on the Duty Roulette, and you can donate money to add to our time or take away from our time. That event was really, 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 really cool. And we were able to do that, I think it was at the end of September.
Yep.
And we were able to raise almost $1,000 for Extra Lives. So huge shout out to everyone that helped contribute to that. That was super awesome. Try to earn some more money for these children's hospitals. Like it's a really, really cool opportunity to do so. And the race is fun. So crazy stuff happens during the race. So definitely check that out when it goes live and look into the different communities. So it's not just us. We do have a few parties that have signed up to join us, and we're all racing each other. So it's going to be a pretty cool event, and I think you will like it.
Among those is Maelstrom Radio will be participating. Also Moogle Go Round Radio.
Right.
I think we also have Phoenix Down Radio, and then a couple of other streamers, podcasters, and also kind of with that, like I said, Moogle Go Around Radio is participating, and thanks to Chili, who is part of Moogle Go Around Radio, we actually will have some nice giveaways. We will have one copy PC of the Final Fantasy XIV Complete Edition, as well as one copy of the PS4 Complete Edition. We'll have codes for both of those to give away. So please look forward to that, as well as maybe a couple of other giveaways too. And as well as one copy of the PS4 Complete Edition. We'll have codes for both of those to give away. So please look forward to that, as well as maybe a couple of other giveaways too. Yay.
Big shout out Chili for that awesome support, and super cool to be able to have that opportunity. So definitely check in.
Yeah, and I believe Moogle Go Around Radio will also have a PC and PS4 code to give away, as well as one other group. So once I get that confirmed, I'll tweet those out.
Yep, awesome.
Great gifts for anybody you want to get into Final Fantasy XIV, or if you're playing on a trial account, this is a way to upgrade.
MMORPG.
Yes.
Lets you play free up to level 60. So
exactly.
It's a big deal.
I'm thinking about giving it a shot.
Yeah.
I think you might be interested. I mean, I've been told that it has like a good story or something.
Yeah, something about story and stuff like that.
Now, see, I want to actually put something to the test here. So I have technically two accounts. I have my legacy account, which I so I have technically two accounts. I have my legacy account, which I can't access. Well, I can access, but I can't put expansions on there, and that's all due to 1.0 RTM hacking my account and using it. But I got it back. But Mark's on there, so I can't put expansions on there, but I can log in. I can purchase stuff from the Moogle shop, but I can't put expansions. So I want to actually go and test that out next time we have a 14-day trial, or I might be able to just log in right now.
Yeah, I believe that it'll work out. Hopefully,
I'm hoping, because they also introduced that new point system, and I'm hoping, because that mark was almost 10 years ago, and they said something about 6 to 10 years on those types of marks. But I'm not sure if they're like saying, hey, we want some actual like play time, not hey, this account's been inactive for like this so long, why are you even trying?
No, I've seen some really miraculous pull through to be able to help out with that for sure.
Yeah, I talked to Koji Fox, the localization guy.
Yeah,
and he talked about it, but I never actually got to fully explain the whole thing. But he said, yeah, we were kind of working on something, but at this time it's not really anything. And if anything, just give a support ticket and talk to them and give them the situation. They'll fix it for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sport 2 never did anything for me.
They get a lot of tickets. I think they go through it, but
Yeah.
they're super busy. But yeah,
So-
before it gets too crazy, I think let's see, checking where we're at right now. So, as I mentioned before, we have Anonymoose with us. Say hi,
Where?
Anonymous.
Where?
Where?
Hey,
Wait.
how's it going?
And he has graciously given us his time to be able to stop in and tell us some really cool stories about the lore community and being a lore enthusiast. And you know how it is with enthusiasts, and you know how it is with Final Fantasy XIV's story. Like this thing can get pretty complex. So Anonymous gets a lot of questions throughout Twitter and Discord about the subject of Final Fantasy lore. And so wanted to go ahead and give him a chance if he could start off by giving us a brief summary of your Final Fantasy XIV journey. So, what got you into the game, what kept you in the game, that kind of stuff. We're looking at, like, if I recall, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you've been in since 1.0, so we're
Yep.
looking about like 10 years now of Final
Yeah, it's
Fantasy
been
XIV.
It's been a hot minute.
So yeah, give us a brief rundown of the journey. How'd you get into it, and how's it been since?
I'm trying to think. Like, I think all the time about how I consider 14 a journey, and I forgot kind of where it started. Let's see. I would say like the big gateway into it was that I did play 11.
Yeah.
I got into it, I couldn't figure out how to pay for it. Like the back end was not very great. Like the account management system was a nightmare, especially when you're in like
yeah.
8th grade. So yeah, I couldn't figure out how to pay for it. So I just put it back on the shelf. I was proud to have it, never played it. And then like a friend of mine was maybe 5 years later. So I decided I was going to play it then. And then they announced 14 a little bit down the line, but like everybody had pulled so far ahead of me in 11 that's what made the idea of 14 exciting. It was just like, oh, me and all these endgame link shells, we're going to be noobs fighting bugs with sticks, same level. I'm not going to be left behind this time. And that was, I think, my motivation to start 14. But like, you can't talk about the motivation to start 14 in 1.0 without talking about your motivation to keep playing.
Right.
Because the first couple months were, let's just say, to make your own fun. And
right.
The story had a lot of potential. The world had a lot of potential. And I think paradoxically for me, the fact that a lot of the stories that we got weren't terribly sensible or interesting, like you couldn't make a lot of sense of them. We didn't figure out until I think the game was down already that you were actually having echoes in the 1.0
Oh, wow.
intro.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
amazing,
convoluted and weird, and we didn't get a lot of answers out of the gate. So I think just like the obsession with playing something that was broken and trying to make sense of it was why I stuck around.
Nice. Okay. And that sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I'm not the broken part, but messing with the breaking, I think it's like Playbox almost.
I think one of my favorite kind of how broken was 1.0 stories is about, have you ever heard of the term punishing barbs?
Punishing barbs.
Yes.
I have not.
One of my favorite kind of how broken was 1.0 stories is about, have you ever heard of the term punishing barbs?
Punishing barbs.
Yes.
I have not.
Yes, I have.
This was a thaumaturge attack in 1.0. It's a little bit like shock spikes, but whatever damage is done to you is done to the enemy. At first, this was stupidly overpowered because the amount of HP you got hit for by an enemy was determined by the difference in your level. So if you got hit by something that was like level 34 when you were level 2, it would hit you for 99999, you know?
Oh gosh. Okay.
So what you could do was you could run up to a level 99, hit punishing barbs, get one shot, and then one shot it. And they figured out this could be pretty easily abused, so they got rid of that. But Thaumaturge had a AoE healing spell. And what we did then was we started getting up into groups of Thaumaturges and going to hunt this level 99 goblin because it was the pretty easily abused, so they got rid of that. But Thaumaturge had a AoE healing spell. And what we did then was we started getting up into groups of Thaumaturges and going to hunt this level 99 goblin because it was the only thing in the game that dropped a crucial crafting ingredient for like the level 43 alembic for alchemist. So like most people were brute forcing through it because they couldn't make it. You just like effectively that's not in the game, right?
Yeah.
So what we would do is, because they were so expensive, is we'd get one marauder and a whole group of Thoms and go out into the field and hunt this level 99 goblin, because the way the Thaumaturge cure was supposed to work is it takes away a little bit of your HP and restores a lot of their HP. Except you could toggle AoE on and off and you were in your own cone. So you lost no HP, you just gained a bunch. And you could just cure bomb everyone.
Amazing.
So we'd stand in a circle and cure bomb the hell out of each other until the goblin threw up this AoE item. And it's just
amazing.
like, that's what we were dealing with in 1.0. Like, you had to make your own fun.
I love it. I love it. That, of course, it sounds painful now experiencing it from the back lens. I imagine at the time it was just that kind of stuff that helped build communities.
Right.
And of course, there's one thing that I definitely have heard you talk about, and so I kind of want to ask if you can share a little bit more about this specific subject. But I know you probably have had a lot of questions about Endwalker, and since it's right around the corner, and with all those questions, wanted to start off with something different, right? I wanted you to talk about the concept of the campfire. Like, I've heard you talk about campfires. I've heard you talk about community building. Can you share a little bit more about that? Like, what inspired that concept for you?
What did inspire that concept? I mean, I know it was the lore forum, but the lore forum wasn't there yet. Localization forum was like. You got to understand kind of what the forum in general was like. They didn't give us the forum until March, and the game came out in like August. So yeah, August, January. Yeah, so it was March 2011 by the time we got the forum, and we were all still pretty mad. So they just opened the floodgates for people to post all of whatever they wanted to say. Like months of pent up rage and disappointment and recommendations and counter recommendations and people telling you your recommendations are stupid. And we all just spent a couple months yelling at each other. I don't think I've used the word ridiculous more times in my life.
Oh my God.
Like, people would be like, jumping will ruin this game. I'm like, oh, ridiculous. Go back to 11. Like we didn't have that sense of community yet. Yeah, I think that was probably the other thing I said a lot. Like, if you love 11 that much, it is still the mindset yet. And it was kind of like a miserable place.
Oh, goodness.
So the localization forum, I forget how this even started. But Koji, when he fixed a bug that someone reported, would give them a little bit of trivia about the world and the story. And we were all like, well, the world's one of the only things that has potential. Let's go hunt for bugs so Koji will tell us stuff. So we all just went out into the world looking for anything like typos, missing space and punctuation, bad grammar, terms used like they were introduced but were never introduced, and we would just bring them to the localization forum like, fix it, trivia please.
That's amazing.
So that was where I think campfire started, because there were just like this small group of weird nerds who would go hunting for bugs, and that to me in my mind made sense to call it a campfire. We were sitting around being nice to each other, quietly discussing off where no one could see. And I think like the idea of managing the campfire, like being the person who just like throws a bunch of logs down and sets it on fire, came into my mind, because back then I was very sarcastic about my approach to lore. I figured like I saved everything that came up on the screen in text files so I could search it pretty easily. And therefore I was the one responding to a lot of the posts. And therefore I should be like strong bad and just declare myself sovereign of this empty lot. For the first couple of weeks, that's all I think I did in there was just like pretend to be the king of nothing as a joke.
That's funny.
I think the only remnant of that is probably my Twitter bio, which just inconspicuously has the words loremonger superordinaire, which I just thought sounded like something strong bad would say, like it's extraordinaire but better. And that's like the legacy of that whole thing. So that's where campfire started, because it was just like it's extraordinaire but better. And that's like the legacy of that whole thing. So that's where campfire started, because it was just like the idea of a small group of people discussing this thing nobody cares about, and it isn't that anymore. It's much bigger now.
Yeah.
It's more of like we've set the entire building on fire and are just throwing a party in the parking lot. It's really
It's a bonfire that got out of control.
Yeah.
A little bit of the trees.
This is a
on
forest
accident.
fire now.
It's lore burning man.
No,
Oh
that's
yeah,
a-
I like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's actually a really cool metaphor. Thinking about how it started off with just this small group of people that like talking with each other about the subject, especially from what I've seen now, especially in the social media sphere. Lore conversations are very, very prominent. You can pop in a lore question or have someone pop in lore question, and there's a few individuals who are available to be able to answer those questions. And a lot of people that I've met in the game recently have been getting really interested in the story, and telling them the story has got them interested in learning more about the story. It's really cool to kind of see how it's a very ripple effect sort of topic in terms of specific parts of the fandom, I would say. But bringing up the forest fire concept, sometimes, and it has also been shown on various locations throughout the community where we can tend to disagree with each other about certain lore subjects, and it may or may not cause some certain issues in communities, debates that spread out where they shouldn't, and certain things get said that shouldn't be said, and that tends to cause a little conflict here and there. So, we're looking at a expansion that's coming out in the next 18 days that is planning to be closure to a story that started in Realm Reborn. So we're looking at about I have to do math in my head, and I hate it, 7-8 years of storyline that's going to be concluded in one big old go.
Roughly, yeah.
And so I predict there's going to be a lot of debates. What are your thoughts? Like, what Realm Reborn? So we're looking at about I have to do math in my head, and I hate it, 7-8 years of storyline that's going to be concluded in one big old go.
Roughly, yeah.
And so I predict there's going to be a lot of debates. What are your thoughts? Like, what can we do to make the forest fire less of a forest fire and more of a campfire? What is some things we should look forward to?
That is if we want it to be less of a forest fire. There's people like me where I'm like, oh, I have gasoline. Let me just toss that out there.
And the thing is I like theories, right? Personally, I like theories, but one thing I do get a little sad about is when people want to fight and argue about lore topics, and it's like, this is supposed to be a friendly thing. We're supposed to be doing this as friends. We're supposed to be kind of socializing about this subject, not turning against each other or conflict each other's intelligence over a matter of storyline. You know what I mean? Just want to hear your side of it, I think.
No, I completely agree with that. Like, we're all human beings who enjoy this unique experience. We've all been on this journey. We all love this game. And to actually go into a fantasy world, create your own character, and build this whole second life just to go into it and be a dick is so weird to me. Like, don't do that.
Right.
I try so hard to be kind. And so what can we do to lessen it going into Endwalker is a big question, because it's not only the fact that theories are going to start flying, it's the fact that this is where we're going to find closure. People have built up years of headcanon, and this is where we're going to find out which theories were right and which theories were wrong. And people who are dicks about that kind of stuff are going to get a little weird probably. And I'm super anxious about that part. I think even if we weren't going into Endwalker, though, my answer to this question would be the same. There's a simple rule of thumb that I like to say. Different things. We focus on different things. Some have been playing the game for different periods of time. Someone can disagree with you. God forbid it's because you've made a mistake. You're wrong. You're actually wrong, and that's why they're disagreeing with you. But someone can disagree with you without it being a reflection of the quality of your character or your ability to read or whether you deserve to talk about lore.
Exactly.
You are not your theory. Your theory is
Right.
your theory. And the result of this mismatch could be anything from a difference of opinion, a difference of preference, a difference of interpretation, a difference of things we find joy in. And even when you're wrong, it's still just that. You read something wrong. You remembered something wrong. You made a mistaken assumption. And it can be that without it reflecting poorly on your quality as a human being. And whenever I think about this, I flash back to the first interview we ever did with Gamer Escape and Koji as a lore thing. The first lore interview, right? And the first question I asked was, do the days of the week have names? And Cody, yeah, they do. And he lists them off, and he's like, and those are the 7 days. And I'm like, wait, aren't there 8 days? Because I'm like thinking back to the calendar in the game, and it's like eight days, 4 weeks, everything's even. So I'm just like, aren't there 8? And he goes, no, there's 7. Wait. Yeah, start that question over. So like that was my first experience. And I was just like, my people, like this is where
That's awesome.
this is where I'm comfortable. This is so funny. Like they make mistakes too. We can make mistakes, and it doesn't make you any less human. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. It just matters that we have fun.
Yeah, that is huge. Thank you for sharing that, honestly. And for all the lore enthusiasts out there, like just remember this is something to have fun with. This is something we enjoy as a community. And whether you're right or wrong, you know, going into Endwalker, when you get those final reveals, when we get these actual closing elements of the story, you know, still remember that it was fun holding that theory up until that point. You know, it was cool. It was fascinating to see how your imagination was the answer up until we got the answer. And then again, like Moose just shared with us, even the devs mess up. So like it's not this perfect, you know, thing that is coming out every single time. It's a construct. It's something that we have fun with and we get to enjoy as a group. So definitely, I really appreciate you share that, because that's a big part of it. It's just remembering everybody's human element coming into this, and some people might be wrong. Like it's bound to happen, you know. But that doesn't make you bad or less of a lore scholar, you know. And some people might be wrong. Like it's bound to happen, you know. But that doesn't make you bad or less of a lore scholar, you know.
Not only do I think it's okay to be wrong, I think you should embrace being wrong sometimes, because sometimes it just makes it more fun. Like, be willing to go down with the ship. Like, I'm going into Endwalker right now fully aware that there are, you know, a dozen hints that the Warrior of Light could be some form of what we could arguably call tempered. I'm going into it fully aware that a plot twist where Vana is not what she seems is possible. And I'm willing to go down with both of those ships just because it's fun to speculate on the way in. Like, if Hydaelyn turns out to be evil, I'm going to be a little crushed, but I'm still going to laugh at it because it was fun to hold that theory along the way.
Yeah.
Also, one thing I've noticed with the lore, like even if you're collecting all this evidence leading towards a certain hypothesis, the writers have, or like even if you're collecting all this evidence leading towards a certain hypothesis, the writers have and probably will always continue to kind of adjust course.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Whatever evidence that you've collected, it may lead you to think, oh, well, this is where it's going, but they may decide to go in a different direction with the story. So, don't build your house on said evidence.
I used to. Oh, go ahead, Tylp.
I was gonna say, I'm just curious to see if Dylan's theory is true.
Garleans are pod
Which
people.
one?
They're
Pod people.
I am writing that until that ship goes down. I don't care what anybody says. That is my theory, and I'm going to stick with it.
Like, I used to lean on this idea that, like, I'm a precedent guy. I like archives. I like precedent. I like what we've seen before. I like to try to put all the pieces that we have together to figure out what's coming. But the devs are going to try to do new that we have together to figure out what's coming. But the devs are going to try to do new, exciting, shocking things. So Precedent has like a 50-50 rate on its best day. But now I'm looking at Endwalker and looking back in time, and Yoshida's just like, yeah, you know, we were going to go to Garlemald, just like normal, hang out in Garlemald, and then everybody was expecting that. So yeah, we changed. So it's just like, they completely change course and can disrupt a theory in one line. So it's not worth being mad at people over.
All right. That's huge. Like the fact that they do in fact change things pretty frequently. And then I always remember, and I think this was another interview that you were able to get with Koji Fox. I think Gamerscape got it during the 2018 Fan Fest, where Koji explained that the writers get to write stuff first before it goes through the lore team. And so there's a huge intent that's put out there. There's always room for more, essentially, because any new ideas that come in or any random ideas that come in, they're probably, yeah, let's do that. That sounds cool. Let's do that. And they'll just be like, boom, car. and then it's like car, and like, but I mean, it's like they kind of explain it sort of, but it's meant to not be taken like this like solid canon law and meant to hurt other people's feelings when you I knew it was like this and things like that. But
Yeah,
no,
I called it. Like saying I called it is the number one way to just suck all the fun out of something for me. Like if I was right, I wouldn't say it. If I was wrong, I wouldn't say it. Like I don't know. Like, does that drain the fun for anybody else when people are just like kind of dunking on each other about it?
it's like in the mood. I can see when people get excited when their theories are confirmed, and I think that's okay. Like excitement for confirmation, but like making someone feel bad or like calling names I did when their theories are confirmed, and I think that's okay. Like excitement for confirmation, but like making someone feel bad or calling names and stuff like that when something gets proven or something gets updated, that just goes right over my head. Like I'm like, really, you're gonna insult this other person because they were wrong? I don't understand what value does that have to the community overall? There is none. Like I don't see any in there, and it just makes no one wants to interact with that kind of activity, especially when it comes to something that we have a lot of new players, like a huge influx of new players recently. And so they all have questions. They all have lore questions. They want to know more about the game. Who do they want to ask questions from? People that are welcoming and like, hey, yeah, I'll tell you about the game's story. Or this one person's like, you're wrong. You got it wrong. That name is wrong. You said it wrong. It's like, no, they're not going to ask you for help.
Gatekeepers.
It's it's Leviosa, not Leviosa. Like we don't need not Leviosa. Like we don't need that.
Don't be Hermione. Don't be Hermione. At least don't be like book 1 Hermione.
Right?
Got better later, but yeah.
Like lore should be for everybody. Like
you hit the nail on the head with one particular like line right in the middle. There is how I think I view it. Is what does that behavior do for the community? Like what does it add? Like it adds something for you and your own personal subjective enjoyment of it. But like, what about the group, the socializing, the whole reason we're talking to each other? What does it add to that? Nothing.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I see it as all kind of being like, I don't know if any of you guys have ever played like Texas Hold'em or anything like that. Theorizing is like gambling. I mean, you can make educated guesses, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to you got lucky. That's it. Like happen to necessarily know better than anybody else. You maybe made some good guesses based off of like certain elements, but that's it. Like happen to necessarily know better than anybody else. You maybe made some good guesses based off of like certain elements, but at the end of the day, you got lucky.
Yeah, you can use knowledge to narrow it down to a field of possibilities and at least not be the person who's guessing something that's like totally impossible, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, like
living,
yeah,
a certain someone guessed
I was surprised. I was surprised I was right about that. Like I held that position solely because it annoyed other people to remind them of it.
Which one was this?
So,
Gaius Lives.
So like, Moose perpetuated the Gaius Lives meme / trope. I guess I don't know. It was trending for a while. I saw it all the time in Gamerscape. I remember that being used a lot. There was an emote made for it. It was a good time.
It was less fun when it was just me. Like because what I used to do is I would go to the forums and I would be like standing, which is really weird for a Final Fantasy game. And this guy is supposed to be like the leader of the 14th Legion. He's the emblematic of this game's Legion, and he's a chump? That's kind of weird. Why would you make your own dude a chump? I think he's coming back. So like every time I did that, I would get like multiple pages of people like, he's dead, you need to accept it. There's no way he survived that explosion. So every time it came time to theorize something, I would make this like 3-page prediction about how we can put all the pieces together, and then Gaius comes in and just just to trigger the whole thing again. And like I'd be sitting there getting mad at it. It wasn't very fun. I think it was Fusion and Ethos who really made it a meme and turned it around and actually made it something fun to say, because it was kind of miserable at first.
Yeah, I remember, I think, what was it? One of the interviews, was it Crow? Was it John Crow that got mad about the Gaius mentioned? Someone mentioned Gaius.
If anybody thinks that it would be beneficial if I sent like an edible arrangement.
Do You want flowers?
But like, for as tense as that interview was, it's probably one of the ones that's aged the best. I'm really proud of it in retrospect. Even if I felt super awkward in the interview, I think we got like really quality discussion in and like entertaining reactions that age well in it. But yeah, that was my last question. It was supposed to be a joke, but there had been a couple of questions that had gone kind of sideways. And made things a little weird. And so when I got to that one, I was like, I don't know if I should be joking right now. Fuck it, here goes. So I just threw it out there, and Ishikawa-san burst out laughing. And just as she does that, John goes, "Really?"
Yeah. No, I read that and I was like, oh, he sounds a little upset about it.
So I think
I read that and I was like, oh, he sounds a little upset about it.
So I think they were both playing off of the knowledge that they already knew he was coming back differently and just kind of like messing with me in the moment. But I wasn't sure at all what I was walking away from at the time. Yeah, I thought John was going to get back to the office and Koji was just going to be like, dude, I told you what you were walking into.
It's like we've been studying you very closely for the past few years. Oh, that's awesome.
That one had gotten tense because of the Dark Knight question. Well, I mean, there was another one. There was one that didn't make it in there that was about Jack at the guild, and it turned out that there was like an error in the like lore that she knew it in the lore as it was written, and we just scrapped that whole thing because they had to like look it up, and I was like, oh, this is awkward. But yeah, we asked why the Dark Knight quests, how those came into being, because they're different in Japanese and English, and they're kind of and the way they saw their warrior of light. So it was really cool, but it was very different. And when I asked about it, Ishikawa-san was like, yeah, I actually didn't know he did that, so I'm just going to let him explain himself.
Oh, shoot.
And I was like, uh-oh.
Oh my, throwing somebody under the bus.
That's funny.
Live under the bus.
Oh no.
Goodness. But yeah, all right. So just to kind of go over some other events in the lore community, with you having been there when the lore tab was first created, and of course everything that led up to where we are now, leading up into our 4th expansion. Wait, hold up, let me count. Yes. Okay, I was like, I got that right. 4th expansion. Okay. But do you have any specific stories like throughout your time in lore enthusiast community that just kind of like stands out above any of the others? Because I know you have a lot of really good moments throughout the specific stories like throughout your time in lore enthusiast community that just kind of like stands out above any of the others. Because I know you have a lot of really good moments throughout the history of the establishment of lore enthusiasts and working with Koji Fox and such. But like, what's the one that stands out the most that you can just relate immediately if someone asked you?
I feel like they all have been so far that I'm just kind of talking your ear off with exactly those stories. But like, is this question coming from an angle of like hanging out with other lore enthusiasts and kind of what's come of that?
I mean, you can, any stories you have of that, or was there an interview? Like, I know we just talked about an interview, but if there's any interview that just came out that was just like, this is it, this is the one that gets what information we're looking for, that kind of stuff. Any really cool lore stories, really?
All of the lore interviews are like that.
Oh yeah, honestly, I do look forward to any time that we have large events, because I know at some point I'm going to see that interview get published, and there's always going to be something. Usually, it's some sort of question I've been looking for a while, and that usually gets answered, and it's nice. And then I'm like quoting it like maybe 6-7 times throughout every Discord I'm a part of. Like, hey, we found the answer to this, y'all.
Actually, instead of like one particular story, I think it's like one trend that goes kind of from interview to interview that I think is kind of the funniest shit. Like, I keep a running tally of open questions. Like, if I see them on the forum, if I see them on Discord, and I think it's a good question, I'll throw it in a pile. And when it comes time that we actually are able to get invited to an interview like that, I pull them all out and I try to curate them down according to kind of my theory of what makes a good interview. And consistently, from interview to interview, one thing that haunts us is that they explain things kind of as they are in the world today, where they're headed heads are at today. And as us is that they explain things kind of as they are in the world today, where their heads are at today. And as we know in the Endwalker era, sometimes that changes a bit behind the scenes. And even though they never directly contradicted it in the game, it's not where their head's at anymore. So, like, we got one answer that was just like, well, we don't want to talk about the heart of Sabik because that's going to be coming up in 3.x. And, you know, you'll be learning a lot more about that pretty soon. So we're just not going to talk about Sabik. And here we are, you know, in 2021. I don't know anything more about Sabik than I did the day I asked that question.
I think they tried to hint at that during the Sorrow of Roulette quest line, and it was like a passing line in Sid's conversation, and that was it. And I was like, "That's it? Are you telling me we've been waiting this long for that one line? Please tell me there's more, please."
The worst times, like the one nice thing about Roulette was like it calls the system that they're using the synthetic Aurosite system, which I think is just a nice little lead into, hey, Sabik is still Aurosite, so we'll get back to it someday.
Hopefully, right?
There's all sorts of funny breadcrumbs like that where like things just change over time and you don't know what to make of them anymore. I don't know what to make of the Soul Blender anymore.
Ramuse
Crystal, that one's supposed to come back. Yep. So that would be like the dev side and the interview side. Fan wise and like lore community wise, I think it's like every discussion I've had with another lore monger named Rockle. There we go. Like over the past 10 years, we have kind of had campfire discussions about everything where I don't even know how much we agreed back then. Like, I think we debated each other nonstop, but like those have panned out as funny as Final Steps of Faith with Estinian shapeshifting between man and dragon, like disrespectfully early. Like he called that like right out the gate. He called like Carvelane's lineage right out the gate before that was everywhere. Like, he gets a lot more of that stuff right. And then I tend to be closer like the world setting stuff, like how things work or what the logic will be behind stuff. I remember when we first did Coil, you had the slimes that were like dark matter.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so the slimes eat stuff and then the dark matter activates and it turns into like dark matter versions of that thing. And I started calling them dark matter dittos. And like Rockle hated this. And like we got to the first fan fest and everybody was like getting their first big reveals from people, and someone on the floor asked Koji like what was going on in Coil, and he referred to Rafflesia as like, and someone on the floor asked Koji like what was going on in Coil, and he referred to Rafflesia as like basically just a giant dark matter. And like I just got an all caps DM that just says frickin' dark matter ditto. Awesome. So like that's been I think my favorite part of like the lore community interaction.
Yeah, and I think that's at least for me, you know, being able to interact with the lore community. I wanted to kind of share that publicly to everyone's as a huge just open invitation. You ever have any lore questions? Feel free to ask. Like anybody that you know that's into the lore of the series or anything like that. Like a lot of us do want to help more than anything, and definitely if you have any like with leading into this expansion, there's going to be a lot of questions. So feel free to ask your heart's content. You never bother any of us. I think a lot of us are really excited to get questions, honestly. So, you know, if you ever do the pings or anything like that, that's awesome. I know I've seen some pings with thread, and then it's kind of a debate, and I'm just like, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait till it stops fighting. But it's still cool. Like it's still cool to be able to help out that way. So feel free to ask any question, because these are the stories that, you know, they form the foundation of this community, and not only the lore community specifically, but the community in general. Because then it's like this is something we get to share about with everyone else, and then be like, yeah, you should totally join the lore community. It's great, things like that. So super cool stuff.
I second that just because I'm excited for any opportunity to review my citations. Like if someone asks me about something, I have to study it from a new angle every time I'm asked about it. Like that's how your brain works. You pull the file, you edit it, you shove it back in, and it's just kind of like. I feel like it keeps me sharp when I get questions. So I feel like people think they're bothering me, but that's almost never the case unless they're like asking me 500 questions about stuff that hasn't come out yet. Like I can't know.
Right.
That's the only time. Everything else, like, ask me any, almost never the case unless they're like asking me 500 questions about stuff that hasn't come out yet. Like, I can't know.
Right.
That's the only time. Everything else, like, ask me anything about the stuff that's out.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that, for sure. So, with the remainder of the time we have, of course, because we do understand you've been working with the lore for a very long time. We got a few lore-related topics of our own to request from you, if you don't mind.
There is lore in here. I thought it was just stories.
Stories and lore. It's stories to introduce the lore community, and then the lore. You know, we want to open invite to everyone who's interested in lore, and then we're gonna ask some questions. Nothing too crazy, I promise. And
I don't know what Van Daniel's plan is.
They took out all of my questions. It wasn't fair.
But so our first question, of course, you know, the game is times we get stuff that reveal older stuff that it took some time to get information about. So, you know, there's a lot of like layers and plots all tied into each other. What do you think is the most obscure buried lore tidbit that gets overlooked all the time? Like something that is tied in, it has an essential element in certain parts of the story, but it, you know, no one talks about it. It kind of just gets missed, like in the main subjects that you think.
Let's see. Deeply meaningful, intricate ones that get overlooked. I think, like, I want to say Gridania and Shinto, but it never comes up anymore. Like, we don't care about city-state lore anymore, apparently. I want to go back to Eorzea and do more of that.
I love city-state lore.
I was gonna say I care about city-state lore, especially.
Oh no, we the fans do. We want more. We want more city-states and clans. We want to learn more about the Duskwhite and the Keepers of the Moon. But like, apparently that's just like old Keepers of the Moon. But like, apparently that's just like old shoes. We've moved on. Like,
I don't know about that, because I'm sorry, like, at least for myself, like when I saw the Great Serpent of Ronka, I'm like, okay, they now have to revisit the adder question and why those symbols are all over the freaking dungeon. I want to know more.
I would love, like, seriously, if we spent a little bit of time around Eorzea. I don't care if it's 3.1 to 6.1 to 6.5, or if it's like another like an Eorzea 2 expansion or something. I do want to go home and get grounded for a bit.
Right.
But I think, let's see. I mean, I will say, like, Gridania is, just because we've talked about city-states now, like, Gridania is very closely related to kind of the ancient Japanese beliefs before Buddhism showed up. And if you know a little bit about what those are, it totally reframes the city. It reframes responsibility to purify that and follow the rituals. Right. And if you don't, that's where they get a little grumpy. So like, I think people have this warped view of Gridania as more xenophobic than they are and more rude about it than they are. And I was one of them until I learned more about this. So I think Gridania and Shinto's overlooked. I think Elidibus's plans are very rarely discussed in their full context. I think the way the Asians have been adjusting the way their first plan went wrong has been extremely interesting, especially through Stormblood, where Elidibus's plans were probably at their most complex, as he tried to manipulate Varys into setting up, like, he thought he was going to get a little bit of a temporary setback that got him better technology and a better stance, and then he could conquer the world with it. But really, Elidibus was manipulating him into letting Eorzea and the East get on equal footing enough so that the war was balanced enough, so that they'd use on equal footing enough, so that the war was balanced enough, so that they'd use Black Rose. And like, there's layers and layers of this in the Asian machinations that you can kind of put together but are never outright discussed. And I find that a little sad. Yeah, because some of those are a little interesting, but most of the hidden tidbits I know are probably not as meaningful. Like, half the realm thinks Mistbeard had sex with Nanamo's mom is probably one I bring up a lot, and that one's always really funny. the demon book, or that, I mean, we have a decoration now that we can put in our house. You can actually read it, and there's a whole lot of words in there that are teasingly familiar. Like there's draconic roots in there, and there's the word Karn in there. But like if you look at the right page, viewer right page, the first and last letter of every line spells out Cthulhu Fhtagn. And until I ribbed Koji, like, hey, I noticed that you can actually read the book. So it's not like A, B, C, D, E, F, G like Dalamud, because Dalamud has text all over it, but that's all it says. It's just the alphabet over and over again. So he's like, oh, yeah, what'd you find? What'd you find? So I listed it. He's like, yeah, you don't have everything yet. So I went back and I agonized over it for a bit, and I found Cthulhu Fhtagn, and I was just like mad the rest of the night.
That's amazing.
Nice.
I know, what was it? It was like a couple of years back from this point, but I know I had an individual in one of the lore chats I was active in where they wrote out the entire book in the Discord. And the thing is like by this point, it had already been discussed in the forums, and Koji's little hints, and then of course the reveal, the reference to Lovecraft. And this person wrote out the entire book and was just like, look, it's Dravanian. And I was just like, hey, not to burst your bubble, like I really appreciate the work you did here, but I'm just gonna let you know right now, Lovecraft. And this person wrote out the entire book and was just like, look, it's Dravanian. And I was just like, hey, not to burst your bubble, like I really appreciate the work you did here, but I'm just gonna let you know right now that it's gibberish, right? It's supposed to replicate 17th century magic techniques. It's supposed to make it look mysterious when it's not really that. Like, because that's what they did back in the day. And this person started arguing with me. It's like, no, it actually has meaning. And I'm like, no, look. And then I put in, Cthulhu Fhtagn, and then I got reported.
Reported?
I got reported
it could be a little
bullying. And I was like, I'm not even, like, I'm trying to help, I promise. I literally, like, I was like, yo, you literally wrote all this, and I feel so bad that you did this because you didn't have to. The answer was already found, But, like, I guess it just didn't come off really well. I don't know, but it... One
day, we're going to find out that all the answers probably an embarrassing amount of time that I probably shouldn't admit to because of the title. The top of the thing says, Ilk Eors, and I was like, the people of Eorzea? And I was like, I was so sure that if I just stared at it long enough, I would learn some deep lore fact about like what it really meant to be Eorzean, and I never.
Mysterious, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't in there.
It was supposed to be the Necrologos, right? Like it was
something like, yeah.
The book that we've heard about so much in every Leave quest, right, up until this point, or at least most of the Leave quests if you've done them. It's like, hey, you gotta go get these pages because some cult found this book and started summoning demons, and we gotta recover this book because it's gonna summon more demons. And so, of course, when you see the book, you're like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's gotta have some stuff in it. Like there's this lead up to push everyone's intentions to look deeper into this book, only to find out it was just a Lovecraft reference. It's it's a good reference, culty, cult. It mentioned a lot of that kind of stuff, so I get it, but it gets overlooked.
My favorite part of this is that you're like, just a Lovecraft reference, because I can imagine Koji like, what the hell, man? That was just going to be like keyboard mashing. I put a lot of work into that. Like,
I mean, I will appreciate the attempts at putting the words in there, but it's like abstract, it means something different for everyone.
What doesn't in this game? Like if you go back in time, like I mean, if you want to talk about something that's been I've seen over the years, like 10 years of watching people try to figure out what Answers is about.
Oh gosh.
Answers is about everything.
Yeah.
There is no lore theory you can have that you can't make a sensible like interpretation of Answers. I've seen interpretation of Answers. I've seen it about primals, Asians, Hydaelyn and Zodiark, like everything you can really connect to that song. So yeah, different interpretations are just part of the journey, I guess.
Part of the journey, yeah. That's awesome. Alrighty. But going from the overlooked elements of lore to the ones that you've probably studied the most, what do you think is going to be, for you specifically, What's the most vexing loose end in the game right now that you would love to see tied up in
For
Endwalker,
me?
and why?
Oh,
Yeah.
God. I think everything on my list would make everybody else mad. Like, I had like 3 wishes from a genie, and I was just like, I wish I had a nice piece of cake right now.
What flavor of cake?
I'm really about to just pause and think about what kind of cake I want right now. Okay.
But,
I got this.
cake
I got
is
this.
delicious. I respect.
Yeah.
I respect cake passion. Like
I can't decide. I've got 2. I've got like chocolate cake with like the layers of like the fudge between it, like in the frosting kind of fudge, like the ganache, or maybe just like a nice, really soft vanilla cake with like funfetti frosting. I don't know which I would choose if you put them down in front of me. That would be
why not both?
that would be a real decision. That would be like a life decision.
That's amazing. Oh goodness.
God,
That's what,
go
buy
ahead.
those 2-for-1 deals or something.
But which one would I eat first? They don't mix.
It's just a
Birthday cake
coupon.
ice cream. That way you have your cake and your ice cream.
That was one of the best 90s inventions. Like you
It
can't.
was. It
One of the
really
best
was.
90s inventions was birthday cake ice cream. I feel like I broke all the rules with that.
It's right up
Yeah,
there
like,
with Velcro.
my lore ones that I don't think anybody would be with me on, maybe a couple, like 1 or 2, but like the name Mordona is clearly dragon speak. What does it mean? Tell me what it my lore ones that I don't think anybody would be with me on, maybe a couple, like 1 or 2, but like the name Mordona is clearly dragon speak. What does it mean? Tell me what it means. I want to know what Abalathia was. Like, why is there so much named after Abalathia and we don't know what Abalathia was? Hydaelyn was originally a songstress, like before we knew her name was Hydaelyn. Like there was just an unseen songstress, and I'm curious what was that, and if it was the Mother Crystal all along. Why doesn't she sing anymore? We've talked about the the life stream as a soul blender.
Yeah.
And now we have reincarnation, and it's just like, let's define those boundaries a little better.
Right.
Who and what were the 12? Because I'm glad we're getting that. Because I've got 1.0 interviews where the original lore master can eat.
8 years later.
Yeah, apparently that plan changed. But to give a more serious answer, I think the big one that I'm looking forward to cleaning up is the Ascian math.
Right.
You can tell that a lot has changed behind the scenes when it comes to the Ascians, to the point that the number of them is not consistent. Like in 2.0, you have 14 black robe shoulder pad overlords, and then in 2.1, Elidibus shows up, and then in 2.3, you got 14 overlords and Elidibus, and then in 5.0, they're like, yeah, there's only 14 of them, and Elidibus is one of them. What? And then, Emerald is like Schrodinger's Ascian right now, and if they raised Emerald right after she died in her retcon back to 2.2, then what about like all the other ones we killed between 2.2 and retcon back to 2.2? Then what about like all the other ones we killed between 2.2 and 5.0?
Yeah.
Is Nabrial, like, why would they raise Emerald 30 seconds later and then just not bother with Nabriales, aside from like, he's Nabriales, why would you want him back?
They're like, you're in timeout, you messed up,
just
you have to wait.
maybe that's the answer. Like maybe they just liked Emerald and they were like, we need her back, and they're just like, okay, we should raise Nabriales too. No, just give me like 5 years. Just give me like 5 years and not having to deal with this shit.
Because I think what is it? They pinned that, they use that as a reference to like kind of show that, well, now that we know there's some sort of tension between Sundered and Unsundered, but a lot of people reference how Nabrialis like argued with La Habrea and all that. So it's like I guess we could just be like, yeah, it was put in timeout.
Yeah, that's those two based on just that. Because there was this scene where La Habrea is like, all's going according to my will, and Elidibus is like, his will, and he's like, oh yeah, right, his will.
Oh yeah, the corrective,
Yeah, so like I just never really noticed the difference between those two until recently. I'm not sure if there was one, but I'm going to pretend there was, give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, so I never really put that together, but I'd love to see the ASEAN math cleaned up because I don't even know how many of them are alive right now.
Right. And like how many versions of them are alive now that we know there's like several versions.
I think the other thing that bothered me recently with the ASEANs is like you can look back at the espers from 12 and everything
Mhm.
kind of translates like you have Emmett Selk. He's death. He's also, the twins like, Nathal or Gemini. And that all lines up. And then you have Fan Daniel. Almost everything lines up. But then you have Gaia, who's Logriff. Selk. He's death. He's also, the twins like, Nathal or Gemini. And that all lines up. And then you have Fan Daniel. Almost everything lines up. But then you have Gaia, who's Logriff. And she's in our game is like the thing of darkness. But yet in 12, she was a scion of light. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Everything else lines up but that one. I was like,
I've everything in a wheel on top of the map of Eorzea, like superimpose it with Mordona at the center. It almost fits.
Oh no.
And if you look at where the primals were summoned based on the elemental wheel and where it almost fits. Almost.
how do you not go
shit.
insane? How do you not go insane?
I have over time. I think is really the answer. There was one day I gave up on it, and I told this story recently. The answer there was one day I gave up on it, and I told this story recently because I finally remembered how it went. I lost the original file, and I got bored enough the other day to like try to resurrect it for no reason but my own curiosity. Is when Heavensward first dropped, the Moogles in English said that
I remember this.
the floating continent was destroyed by fire that rained from the skies. And I was like, wow, that's cool. That's weird. And then I tried to learn more about it by looking at it in all the languages. And Japanese was like, it was a calamity of wind, endless hurricanes. I was like, wow, the first umbral era is what they're remembering. Why is it fire from the skies?
Yeah.
So I thought a little too hard about it. And I came to the conclusion that the presence of too much fire beckoned forward the wind to cause the beckoned forward the wind to cause the calamity, because you had an imbalance that needed to be redressed. And that's when I realized that if too much fire was the problem that was solved by wind, then the first era was really ice. And all elemental cycles start with ice. So I've solved the puzzle. I've figured out why the calamities start with wind and everything else starts with ice, because the true era started with ice. And then I spent the next several weeks trying to work out how you could rock that back and forth to have like, okay, so the true era is ice, and then they bring in too much fire, and that melts the ice, and then that beckons the calamity of wind to redress the too much fire, and the true era shifts from ice to water. Okay, how do we work out why there was supposed to be the era of water, and then like too much lightning, or no, it was like not enough. I don't remember. I'll get it back. Whatever. And I did this for all of the eras. And I made this like double helix looking thing, and it almost fit. And it's like, I've done it. So I went to the forums and I was like, I've done it. And I laid out this whole thing, and John Crow comes in and goes, oh yeah, that was a typo.
Gosh, I remember the crash. You could feel the glass shatter in that thread because it was.
I had it.
You worked so hard on that reply.
I would have to actually go outside and just let loose a primal scream at that point.
It was just like, and it was such good work too. Like I remember, the thing is, it's like a lot of the stuff that I find in the forums, comes from search engine. Like the search engine pings these replies back to me when I'm looking for information. And so yeah, that thread is part of the search. Whenever you're looking for elements specifically, engine pings these replies back to me when I'm looking for information. And so yeah, that thread is part of the search. Whenever you're looking for elements specifically, if you ever look for Final Fantasy 14 elemental wheel or anything like that thread pops up, and you can see it where it's just all this work you did. Like you had all this evidence, you had everything planned out really well, and it's really good read. It's a really good like set up, as far as explaining something, and then the very next reply is, "Oh yeah, that was a mistranslation," and it was just like, what? Like, come on.
That's where I gave up on a lot of stuff. Like that was the day that I learned that I can put 6 into something and it can amount to nothing. And I should be using my time management skills a little more wisely when it comes to how I work on lore projects, because that just came tumbling. Like it changed my world. Like I was so sure. And like even after he
Well, we salute you for all that work, because you did a really good job preparing that document for sure. Like it just, I still have mad respect for the amount of work and research that goes into these things, even if the reply ends up being it's a mistranslation. Like even if that's the result, it's still like knowing that someone has that kind of passion alone is just nice. I think it's cool.
I would be less mad if they were just like, yeah, that's what we meant. Good job.
Right? The confirmation would just
I made
come on,
sense.
look at all this evidence. Come on.
I made sense of an ancient retcon. Just keep it. You can have it. And then like meanwhile, like I had this other grand theory that I couldn't ever fully close about the tattoos, like the Scion tattoos.
Right.
Like this second tattoo showed up in ARR, and it was only on the members of the Scions at first. ARR, and it was only on the members of the Scions at first, and people who were affiliated with the Scions, people who joined the Scions. And it was like the eye symbol. You know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that like it looked very, very similar to the Charlayan Archon one. So like my theory was, oh, maybe it's the Scion brand. You've got the Charlayan Archon logos on the sides, and you've got the eye for the Echo, and it's the combination of the Path of the 12 and the Scions of the 7th Dawn. And I said this to Koji, and he just went, what? So like that was wrong, apparently. And I thought, if I understood him correctly, he was saying that they weren't connected. They were just the two symbols that meant the two things. And like, I know he definitely said they weren't connected, I think. I don't know. Like it was off the record. It was just a discussion.
Yeah.
So I never really took it too seriously. I just kind of shit posted about the tattoos. And now they're like, hey, by the way, that connected, I think. I don't know. Like it was off the record. It was just a discussion.
Yeah.
So I never really took it too seriously. I just kind of shit posted about the tattoos. And now they're like, hey, by the way, that eye symbol is actually just a really complex version of the Charlayan Archon logo, which is a pretty far cry from they're not related. And I don't know how to feel about that.
Oh goodness. No, it is funny to kind of see how the community had there's an interesting flow between community interaction and the dev team as in far of narrative, because we find these little things that we talk about, and we have these really cool engaging conversations about, and they notice it, and I'm pretty sure they're like, oh shoot, hang on, write that down, we need to go figure this out before the next expansion. Like, come on, make sure we can put this in here, because they are now asking for it. We need to make sure we have a chance to answer this. But in that same vein, actually, and we're kind of a few minutes left, so we're gonna see how much we can reach within that time frame. But no worries, like it's just we're having a really good conversation. You know what happens?
More like guidelines, really?
Yeah, more like guidelines. But what for you, out of all the stuff that has encouraged the dev team to reveal things because of the events of the research and the stuff that we do as a community, what's been your all-time favorite lore reveal? Like what just was like, yes, we got this because we were talking about it, or something like to that effect?
Is it okay if it's not like serious?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, by all means.
Okay. This has got to be Duke Brett V. Like that is my favorite reveal of all time because of Hildebrand.
I love it.
Now, the first thing I will state is that like even when, to go back to my last example there, like where I was trying to figure out the tattoos and things clearly like weren't totally explained in the beginning, where I was trying to figure out the tattoos and things clearly like weren't totally explained in the beginning and may have changed in progress, who knows? Like the fact that we could talk and joke about it along the way is 10 times more important than being able to know or guess it right in a way, right?
Right.
So like how many years did Yoshida tell us about his plans to add like open world primals to the game? And it just never kind of happened, but it was still fun to know where his head was at. That's where I feel like I'm at with a lot of these things. But then there's Duke Brett. This was just before Heavensward. We were learning a lot about Ishgard, and we learned that there was actually nothing higher than a count before you went into church ranks, and that the church controlled most of it. So the county was actually as high as you could go. And I went back into the 1.0 DATs to try to figure out like what from those files can I determine we can learn about Ishgard. And I found a guy that was an Ishgardian account. Who's this Duke? And I expected we'd just write it off. It was another thing from like 1.0 that wouldn't make sense. We'd let it go. It's fine. But again, John Crow comes in and he goes, I have sad revelations regarding the man commonly known as Duke Brett V. And he weaves this whole story about how Brett is like a scam artist and that there's no such thing as an Ishgardian Duke. And if anyone knew anything about Ishgard, they would instantly see through his bullshit. And that he actually got found out and that's why he disappeared from the game, is because he's so embarrassed about having not only been found out as a liar who's not Ishgardian nobility, but that he pretended to be a rank that doesn't exist. So he's gone into hiding. He'll never be seen again. And today in taverns, you can still hear the phrase, "Ha ha, and I'm an Ishgardian Duke." And I loved that story. That was very funny.
Nice.
And if you have any memory of Duke Brett V, this is a joke for like 5 people in the world, you'll know there is no such thing as an Ishgardian Duke. Ergo, this person is lying to Hildebrand the entire time. The vase is probably worthless. So like that's my favorite lore reveal, because like it's just this inside joke that's never gonna end.
That's amazing. That is really cool. And that's the kind of stories I like a lot about the engagement with the lore community, because everyone was talking about it. You got to ask the question, and then the devs answered it when they had the chance, and then you realize it's just this funny moment everyone gets to share with, and then it gets referenced again in later editions of the game, and it's like I don't want to compare it to like the concept of like laying down the bricks of history kind of thing, but in its own sort of way it is, because it's like now everyone can remember the bricks of history kind of thing, but in its own sort of way it is, because it's like now everyone can remember that this is where this came from, right? This moment in time where everyone's talking about the Ishgardian Duke. And then now it's in the game as an actual element of everyone knows it's meant to be a lie. So it's just really cool that they do that, and they do that a lot with a lot of things that I've seen, especially lore conversations that we've had in the forums.
I like
do
to
tend to come
call
up
it-
a lot in the game.
I like to call it a nudge.
Right.
Like I think it's amazing that they read the lore forums, they read the discussions, and they actually get inspired by them and adjust kind of how the world is explained based on them and add little bits to the world from them. Like I've seen no less than a dozen times an actual piece of the lore get explained differently or adjusted differently because of the conversations that were happening. And that's what I like, that, like you were saying, that idea that we can reach out and nudge our favorite franchise just a little bit, that it may not ultimately be of consequence, but that we nudged it in the smallest ways is, I think, one of the coolest things about the journey that 14 has been on.
Yeah, I love it. It's that's just why, for me at least, being part of the community and seeing this growth and seeing how there's a sort of dynamic between community and dev that I don't see in many other games, that just, especially in the lore community where it happens, it's super cool. Especially with the lore book too, because lore book was entirely community requested, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like it was like something that people asked about, and then
it had
like,
been,
let's do this.
It had been requested in kind of a way that, like, I don't know if anybody really expected it to happen, because
just a passing reference kind of thing. Oh, I wish we had the lore book.
Yeah, I wish I wish it was like I think the gold standard that I hold everything to in terms of world companions is probably Dragon Age. Their world companions are excellent books. Full of all sorts of like art and story and world building, and just like, as far as I know, like I'm not deep, that I hold everything to in terms of world companions is probably Dragon Age. Their world companions are excellent books. full of all sorts of like art and story and world building, and just like, as far as I know, like I'm not deep enough into Dragon Age to know if they're riddled with errors or anything, but like I found those books very great, and I wanted something similar for 14, but I didn't think it would happen because it's not something that Squeenix usually invests in. It's not like there's no Encyclopedia Spira, there's no Encyclopedia Ivalice. What are the chances that what we're gonna get is Encyclopedia Eorzea for the MMO, you know? So
Right.
I didn't expect it to happen, and that it did. That this insane journey the lore has been on has snowballed to such a point that this is the first full like lore driven experience with books coming out. That's wild. And yeah, it was community requested for a while.
That's awesome. I love it. Alrighty. I think we have just a few more minutes on the clock left, but
I'm allowed to have the small amount of time. So this is going to be kind of silly. So I like to come up with off-the-wall theories, as many people know. It's just what amuses me. So I have a couple of rather silly theories that I would like your feedback on, if you're willing.
Sure.
Okay. So I've got these actually written down, by the way. Theory 1. Moogles, secretly or not so secretly, believe that the universe is contained inside of a Koopo nut, and in some Moogle circles, refer to the shattering of the source as the Great Nut Cracking.
I would buy this. Like, would it end up as a PR blurb in a lore book? All Moogles believe this? I don't know about that. But like, the idea that there is a small group of Moogles out there, and this has just become entrenched in their belief system, and it's accidentally very close to the truth, even whatsoever, and are probably just talking out of their ass like they always are, is probably like as funny as I could imagine it being.
I really hope to like stumble upon like a Moogle cult worshiping like the Koopo nut more than they do, and referring to the Great Nut Cracking. That just would make me so happy.
Like the Moogles are just so childlike to me in a way. Like they're wholesome and annoying at the same time, and just every time they get something right completely by accident, it fills me with joy. So I like that just because it hits that sweet spot for me.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
So this one is probably, I don't know if it's more or less silly. Julianne Manderville is actually the goddess of Menfina. I really actually do believe that. Godbert is Birgot. Still can't like convince me otherwise. Following the release of the botanist savage job Reaper, she will finally demand that the next job is a DPS.
It's too specific. You had me in the vague area. Like what makes her specifically Menfina?
Just because she's crazy and, lunar crazy, and she has a frying pan.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, no, she has, she just has that very kind of like, I guess, like fiery and passionate personality that I just, from like some of the Hildebrand quests, I think specifically from Heaven's Word, made me think that's like, yep, she's more than meets the eye. She's not.
The first thing I'm having to do is first off dissociate from my dumbass theory that Godbert Manderville doesn't exist. That he's actually. My theory is that Godbert Manderville is a hoax perpetrated by Rowena to cover up that she qualifies for a syndicate seat she doesn't want.
Amazing.
And that this is all her front. So I have to dissociate from that. Qualifies for a syndicate seat she doesn't want.
Amazing.
And that this is all her front. So I have to dissociate from that theory for a moment. And now I'm thinking about just how much I would enjoy it if it turns out the 12 really did have representatives in the game and they were nobody important. Like if that was Menfita and Birago, and then just some random dude at the Scholasticate was Thaliak, and just what if they were all in the game and we've met them all?
Passive observers. Oh my gosh. What? Okay, so now that
I really think that this is possible. I really think it's possible because I actually had a follow-up theory that was like Godbert Manderville is really Birgot the Builder. His primal form is the gold saucer itself, and his continual summoning is fueled by adventurer participation in gates, mini games, Jumbo and mini Cactpot, and especially the Make It Rain campaigns.
I don't mean to turn this into a theme, but I mean, like, if you think about it, it kind of fits. It's kind of like I love the way they purposely do threads of history like that. Like, they drive me crazy just because, I mean, I don't think anybody hasn't noticed that Birago and Geralt have a lot in common.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So,
no,
like,
it's
Just build
yeah.
everything off of a whim. Well, he builds better when he's drunk, but you know.
and in
there
his
were-
underwear.
And there were people
Right.
for years trying to come up with a way to connect, Louis Zwadathalyak, and then try to figure out, like, are all of the Circle of Knowing the Archons? Are they really the 12? And then the Asians, are they really the 12 somehow? And the counter summoners of Hydaelyn, and then, like, what if a Zem came back with 11 friends? And then it turns out it's just, they were 11 really, or they were 12 really cool people, like, a long time ago, and now these are the shards of their soul in the present day. And
Connected in the
One's a-
myth. Yeah.
one's a drunk, and
I mean, if you think about it, like you read, if you,
Connected in the
One's a-
myth. Yeah.
one's a drunk, and
I mean, if you think about it, like you read, if you've ever read any of Greek mythology, those were gods, and they were all very, very flawed individuals.
that's
So,
what we were supposed to have.
They were supposed to be based off the Greek gods, right?
Yeah, have you ever read this old thing called the Dusty Tomes?
no.
It's like
I read it online. Yeah.
1.0. In 1.0, the little 12 lore we got, it was a little bit in the Dusty Tomes and a couple from some NPCs, and the gods actually, they were a lot like the Greek gods because Eorzea is based on Greece, and they had petty wars, and mankind was born to play out their proxy war. And I think the Mughals even still believe that the Great War of the 12 before they left man forever was started over a spilled goblet of wine.
Yeah.
Like, that's what led to the first Umbral era and why they left us.
I remember that. That's amazing.
The Great War of the 12 before they left man forever was started over a spilled goblet of wine.
Yeah.
Like, that's what led to the first Umbral era and why they left us.
I remember that. That's amazing.
So plausible, I don't know, but would I love it? Yes.
Yep. Okay, last one was Nutkins are in fact the most intelligent creatures on Hydaelyn.
All of them, or just the one that hangs out with Thancred?
We'll go with just the one that hangs out with Thancred.
Do all Nutkins have the ability to perceive and break the fourth wall?
I would say so. Yeah. Now, I think that Nutkins have some special abilities that we haven't quite seen. They're kind of like the mice from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yoshida hit me with a point once upon a time, and I don't even remember where it was. Like, I know it's in his voice. I don't know if it was in a live letter or an interview or just random and fourth wall breaking and just utterly stupid, but it makes you happy and it's funny. Can you have a true Final Fantasy game without that? And I thought about it for a while and I was like, I kind of can't. Like, that's been in all of them.
Right.
So now I'm just very, very open to it.
My main argument in support of that would definitely be the fact that two of the most not infamous characters that appear almost in every Final Fantasy since their first appearance is Biggs and Wedge. And if that's not fourth wall breaking, I don't know what is.
Watch, I'm going to go to dig this up later and it's not going to be Yoshida that said it. And I'm going to be like, no.
So, and for those who don't know, Biggs and Wedge were characters from Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a Star Wars reference.
So yeah, just Biggs and Wedge in itself is just completely fourth wall breaking. It's beautiful. I love it.
Amazing. Alrighty.
So that's all for me. I'm good. Thank you for allowing me to do that, Croa.
No worries.
I behaved myself.
Off for the night. Once again, looking forward, we got 18 days left until Endwalker comes out. And so what's your plans leading into that? What's the first lore thing you're going to look for as soon as you load in to those screens and the updates? Like, are you going to do MSQ immediately? Do you think you're going to go check out the new jobs? What do you think is the first thing that's going to be on your mind that day for as far as just lore stuff?
It's going to be MSQ. It can't not be. Yeah, I'm going to binge the whole thing because there's so much I want to know, and I feel like we're supposed to know like everything pretty soon, like almost everything. So it's like I really want to know what is and isn't in that basket. I'm just gonna I'm gonna print out the entire 2 Ask Koji and Oda-san list, and I'm just gonna like cross them off as I go.
That's awesome. Sweet. Well, thank you so much for
Koji and Oda-san list, and I'm just gonna like cross them off as I go.
That's awesome. Sweet. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. So thank you to everyone that came in to hear this fantastic opportunity to hear from the Moose himself. You know, the stories and the opportunities that has come from engaging with the lore enthusiast community with all the interviews and everything. So huge shout out to Anonymoose. Thank you for giving us your time and sharing those stories with us. We really do appreciate it, and being able to hang out a little bit and talk about that kind of stuff, because it's just really cool, you know, especially with the community behind Final Fantasy XIV.
Literally
So,
anytime. Like, it's an honor to be invited anywhere, really. To think that anyone would want to listen to me ramble on and then be like generous enough to call it like all these lovely adjectives you've just laid out.
no, like it really
I don't
is
know
a
if
super
that's
cool opportunity.
You're
It's like
overselling it.
well, it really
I don't
is
know
a
if
super
that's
cool opportunity.
You're
It's like
overselling it.
well, the thing is, like, and I guess this is just from my perspective. You know, I remember still, like, my first meeting of you was so I could get a signature on the lore book. Like, that was my first like in-person meeting, and just like from that point on, I would just notice how super cool you are with the community, and that's a big deal because it's like you have all these experiences, right, with the devs and with all these communities and the growth of the game from its inception to its current state. And then being able to still be like, yo, come and say hi and things like that. Like that's just huge. And I think it's really cool that you do that. So really appreciate you giving us
Literally
your time and
anytime.
stuff like that. But yeah, did you want to give you where can people find you? Like, what's the easiest way to contact you if they ever have any lore questions or anything?
I'm still looking for myself. Let's see. Lore forum at Anonymoose XIV forum at Anonymoose XIV on Twitter. Pretty much any Discord with a lore room, and if you have one that I'm not in, you should invite me to it. Gamer Escape's the easiest way to find me, though.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Then, of course, you know, this is XIV Light Party. You can find us on twitch.tv right here on this channel. We got our recordings and other videos that you can check out on YouTube. And of course, you will also catch this on Anchor, where you can listen to this as audio only on your podcast listening app of choice. We're also on Twitter as well at XIV Light Party. So seriously, thank you so much for this. This has been an absolute joy. 18 days left. We're on the what, 2 weeks and a couple days left, and it's probably going to zoom as fast as everything else. So I hope everyone's excited. I know I'm excited. It's gonna be great. So
I imagine come this Friday, the live letter makes me like, oh my goodness, I have so much preparation.
everything else. So I hope everyone's excited. I know I'm excited. It's gonna be great. So
I imagine come this Friday, the live letter makes me like, oh my goodness, I have so much preparation to do.
oh yeah, it's gonna be pretty crazy. So you know, get ready, get ready for the marathon, because you know, take your time with it. That's a big thing. Enjoy this game. Take your time with it, but also get ready because we got a lot to look into. But yeah, so thank you so much, Moose, for your time, and you know,
Thank you.
Dylan and Tylp, thanks for coming out. Thanks to the audience. I hope you all enjoyed it. And of course, if you ever have any later questions or anything else that comes up, feel free to ask us or ask Moose at any time. We are always available for those kind of questions, lore questions, especially leading up to Endwalker. Any last minute story elements you want to catch up on, if there's anything you're missing out on that you want to learn about, feel free to ask about that. We are always down for that. And remember, Halloween might be over, but Moon's haunted. So keep watching the skies and